Ergen splitting, loud and booming. Okay, here we go. Floberts, BBs, CV, garden, galleries, percussion, cap guns, 20 calibers. Let's call the whole thing off. So, what's this about? Okay, one of the things a lot of you don't know about is, or maybe you do, is the origin story for a bunch of really silly things that we take for granted, like cap guns. I'm not kidding. And why is it a paper strip? And sometimes they're discs with they look like little red caps and that sort of thing. So I'm going to bring this up. 1845, 22 caliber BB, the Flobert bullet, round ball, pressed into a primer cap or breech percussion primer cap that was originally used for a cap block gun. This is the very, very weird evolution of literally rocks and stones. Flint locks used a mechanical hammer that would drop down and drop a piece of flint onto a piece of metal, steel, and what comes off in the sparks is actually the steel, the iron oxide molecules burning in the air. They're split off at a very tiny layer, and it comes off and it mixes with air and burns. That would land in a pan with 4F, very, very fine grain powder, gunpowder. This would make a poof, and that would go down in a pathway into a little hole and go down into the breech. And in that would be the actual gunpowder, and that would then propel, pressing against a patch of cloth, the round ball out the barrel of the pistol or rifle. But this puff that would happen just before it would alert deer or elk or whatever you were hunting, or even an opponent. And it wasn't that reliable, and it didn't like being exposed to water and weather. Now, someone got the bright idea of using something reasonably new in a fulmate compound. It would immediately snap. It would actually explode on its own if it was hit by something, in fact, and it didn't make a puff of smoke. So you could just have the hammer hit with a blunt instrument, hit the layer, and to ignite the powder, or not, more accurately, and ignite a layer, a thin one, not make as much of a puff, and definitely set off the charge of gunpowder, because it was an explosive all by itself. It was very sensitive. But here's the deal. This hole that was drilled basically into the side of your little tiny cannon, instead of having a wick and a fuse, having this pathway of actively fast burning gunpowder, 4F, burns fast, sometimes called flash powder, even though that's the wrong word. Someone got a bright idea one day. This is, I'm doing a false evolution of this idea. We would like it to where we didn't have to pour the gunpowder in and then put the cotton down and then pack it down with a shortstop and then push it down there with a rod and do all that fiddling around. It should just go in and fire. Now, here's this idea. At the bottom of some of these barrels, there would be this kind of cone shape, so that the hole from the side would meet in this little triangular area down here, and it would set off this bit of gunpowder, and it would evenly burn all the gunpowder. So someone thought, hey, why don't we make a package that fits in the bottom of it and just shove the whole thing down there with a ball on top. Okay, it's not a breech loader where you load it from the end that you're firing from. It's a muzzle loader. And the reason there is an idea of a breech loader is you could do the same thing, and there were cannons like this that would open at the breech and then close up, and you'd even screw them shut, and you would set them off with some other method, like pulling a cord and hitting some sort of sensitized material. Someone got the bright idea, hey, why don't we make a brass casing or thin metal casing to put the package of explosives in, the gunpowder, and just drop it down the barrel, and you could even make it to where it would hit and set itself off. And someone else got the bright idea, hey, why don't we take this fulmate stuff and just line the whole metal container and make it to where it has a kaboomer on the end of it. Well, someone got the bright idea, well, let's make it to where it's literally, it looks like a snow cone with a lead ball on the top looking like the ice cream, and make the whole damn thing one big sensitive detonatable surface. These were not very popular because, you know, they were being used for, like, let's say, the Navy, and if you dropped one into the magazine, it would set off the whole damn thing and kill everybody. But anyway, this is my little story. So anyway, not yours. Or you could do the other thing where, to make it to where it would work in wet weather, they would use a full mate over not the hole here, but a extended out metal piece called a nipple, and they would put it on the end of it, and they would just hit it with a hammer like that. It would set it off and put just enough of a spark down through the hole to set off the gunpowder. Now that's called a cap, percussion cap. You could also have a piece of tape, paper tape, with the same thing on it, and that's the bang caps that we had when we were kids. And if you didn't know it, the little round disc ones that have all the little tiny cups on them, those are percussion caps. In fact, the diameter is almost exactly the same thing. The standard for it was based on, well, these were used for firing weapons, but you could make a toy out of them. So in 1845, as I mentioned, the 22 BB round was created by literally jamming a BB into one of those percussion caps so that you could use it as ammunition. You could just take the whole thing, stuff it in, and then have a hammer hit it and it would fire the BB. And this is a breech percussion primer cap with a round ball jammed into it. Now these things are bordering on adorable. They're nicknamed chipmunk shot or micro bullets or whatever. Now it was originally used as a weaponized cap gun, I guess you could say, in that era, the Flobert, along with another one for making something really simple, something to shoot in a small gallery, something that wouldn't hurt anybody. And it was more convenient than using an air compressor and making an air gun, which is what is used these days. And they were reasonably cheap to make. I mean, it's parts and pieces you would use for making a shotgun at the time that would be still a muzzle loader, and you just take one of the BBs from that you would normally put down there and one of the percussion caps and make a little toy gun thing. That's all. There's also a conical one. So there was the BB and the CB. The conical bullet Floberted by jamming it in there in a breech percussion primer cap, weaponized cap gun, and that one you could also add gunpowder to it. But anyway, the 1845 one was a round ball called a BB, which stood for breech ball, or breached. You get the idea. So anyway, 1857, 22 short cartridge was created, and that's basically a 7.5 millimeter diameter, like the bullet casing. They're the same diameter. It's important. That means the bullet, as it's jammed in, has the bottom of it kind of smaller, so it fits into it, so it stops at a certain depth. Otherwise it could be shoved in by accident and maybe press on and set off the gunpowder. 1865, to stay in business as the Civil War was ending, gun companies started making toy cap guns and finding excuses to get people to buy them for fun, mostly children, since they ran off of literally using the caps and tape-based caps too that were used, for firing guns. Just using random parts you would use for maintaining a gun, so you'd make a little toy gun and the kid could say, "Dad, can I have some parts?" and go play with it. But it's just a noisemaker. Essentially harmless. Until a kid gets creative. 1871, the 22 long cartridge was created. This is just a longer cartridge with more speed. More oomph. Well, then 1880, the extra long cartridge running on, all this is still in black powder, but these others can be upgraded to smokeless powder, or downgraded, depending on how you look at it. And that one was, it's like a Super 22. It's kind of weird looking. And then 1887, 22 long rifle bullet, made longer for impact and rifled for stability, was used for rifles. It was specifically made that way because it had to be made longer to make it heavier because it still had to go down the same barrel, which meant if you didn't spin stabilize it, it would very likely tumble, unless you made it nose heavy and did a bunch of other things like you would do on a pellet gun, where you basically make the ass end hollow and filled in with something, or leave it open. Drag stabilizing it slows it down. So they did, I mean, rifling had been done before, but the idea with this was really simple. It made it a better bullet. That's a long rifle. Anyway, the 1888 conical bullet version of it. There's also versions of this that aren't 22 that are like 9mm Flobert. The goofiest looking 9mm bullet you'll ever see. I laughed when I saw it. And then 1890, the 22 WRF, which is a different bullet type. Now, in 1970, the 22 Magnum cartridge came out. This one had a larger diameter to the base of it, and the bullet jammed into it, which is how normally bullets are thought of. They're a casing and then the bullet's in it and it's inset. So they're not compatible across the way. You don't want to try to cross them up because they physically won't go into each other. The 22 short and long rifle don't match the Magnum. Accurate short rifled pistol barrels work because there's enough time to get down the barrel to stabilize it, and just a little bit. And spin stabilizing it, no matter what bullet, makes it more stable. Next, you can have a long smoothbore barrel and kind of get some accuracy out of it, but over long distances, unless it's a completely round shape or very short and stumpy, the bullet is going to be very susceptible to tumbling. You need it to spin stabilize. Smooth barrels can only be free of tax stamps and legal restrictions if they're muzzle loaders, because a muzzle loader is considered obsolete in design to the point that it cannot be considered a real practical weapon. If it's a muzzle loader replica, even if it's a tiny one, as long as the barrel lengths and all the other things are satisfied, you could build whatever you want to. You could have an inaccurate 18-inch or shorter barrel shotgun that would then be Class 3 1934 any other weapon status and get a $200 maker fee tax. Or you could have an 18-inch long toy musket. Now the reason for this rifling is many-fold. But anyway, a vintage 1934 smoothbore handgun 22 would be criminal, non-traceable ballistic forensic rifling defeating, because it was a new science, right? The other thing is, it would be considered a concealed or sawed off something because it doesn't fit the standard for something else. Pistols and revolvers that chamber shotgun shells you can look up, but they have to be rifled, even though that defeats the purpose of using shotgun shells. And if it uses a slug, you might just well use a normal bullet. So, the other reason for this is just so that the damn well work. The rifling doesn't have to spiral the bullet, it just has to be rifling. Yes, there are straight rifled bullet pathways for 22s. And if you want to look up powder actuated nail gun blanks that are purple and go ahead and do something that'll end up wasting your time and money, there's $22 for 100 of them. So that's about all I wanted to bring up here. There's just a bunch of links below, and I'm just going to leave this as a note to myself and anybody else who wants to look up all the links below me.